You're 1 foot sort of in the present, 1 foot always thinking about the near and long-term future. Lately, the last 5 or 10 years, I also have a foot in the past because I want to understand, what we've done here in 50 years and build on that. When you're younger, you think, oh, there's always new ideas. I can do it better. I studied business. I can do it better. Our parents didn't know what they were doing. Now you realize there's a lot there. There's a lot of good information and good resources that you can learn from the previous generations about how things were done. Not everything that's new is always better.
For Valley View Winery, you can't talk about the present or even the future without taking a walk into its past. And for the most part, the past is wrapped up in one man with a big dream. Frank Wisnovsky and his wife Ann visited Southern Oregon in the 60s, fell in love with the sunshine, and Frank, who was in construction, started to become increasingly excited about growing grapes.
He decided that he wanted to give it a shot, so he put 4 of us in a 20-foot trailer and a dog, and we spent 5 weeks traveling across country and settled in Ashland and on Valley View Road at Valley View Travel Park.
Mark Wisnovsky says his dad did his research, talked to people from the Extension Service about planting grapes, stopped by the Historical Society where he learned about Peter Britt and the original wineries, even checked maps to see where grapes were originally planted.
He drove and kept driving by this place, and it just struck him, and he decided to just stop in and talk to the owners, and it wasn't for sale. And he just, over the course of weeks and months, was able to convince them to retire, and found out the guy wanted, his dream was to be a commercial sports fisherman. So he said, well, you can go buy a boat in Brookings and move over there and get rid of this farming thing and sell me your place. And the guy finally said, all right.
They bought the property in 1971, and in the spring of 72, he put in the first 12 acres.
And that was pretty much the first commercial vineyard. Troon is about the same time as well.
At first, for Frank, it was just about growing grapes and selling them.
Then a couple years later, as he started to meet people like Dick Troon and John Osterhout out over in Eagle Point, Ted Gerber was starting over in Cave Junction, he came up with this idea of doing a sort of a custom crush winery that would bulk out wine and sell it to mostly wineries in California. Because at the time, we were about the 12th, in 1976 when we became bonded, I think we were the 12th or 13th winery to be bonded. And we were the only one south of Roseburg. So it was, there was nothing here.
Mark says it started out as Valley View Vintners, and in 1974, or maybe 75, the plan was to have other small vineyard growers, along with his parents, process grapes and make wine in the hay barn on the property. But when the first vintage was harvested in 1976, the business plan simply didn't work out.
Since that sort of fell apart, my dad was a little bit stuck on what to do with the grapes. So he brought them up to Bill Fuller, who was at Tualatin Winery, and had Bill Fuller make the first wines from 76 and 77, which are right over your left shoulder right now. The very top wine there, which has that that's a typewritten label that my mom typed on the first bottles. We were able to get a sample label of the original Peter Britt label from the Historical Society, and because of course there's no scanners or copy machines really, we had a friend of ours, and she hand drew the whole label, basically copied all the scroll, all the old label type, traced it, copied it, and created that first label, which is virtually identical to Peter Britt's label, including the pure native wine on the top.
At that point, Mark says his dad knew he had to do things himself. Frank started his own construction company to fund his project, and that hay barn turned into the winery, but not without Frank's personal touches.
He had a big crane that was at that time, I believe, was the biggest crane in Southern Oregon. So he lifted up the entire building and put it on these concrete piers because he realized that he needed some tanks.
That's when things really started to come into focus. But within just a couple of years, the Wisnovskys' entire world turned upside down.
He died in a construction accident in 1980. So it was obviously a giant shock. I was 16, Mike was 12. My mom went along with the dream. She obviously was extremely supportive and instrumental, but she also had 4 kids, and this was obviously not part of the plan.
While a lot of people at the time, even some of their biggest supporters, assumed his mom would sell the winery, Mark says she hung on to it until her children were old enough to decide if they wanted to be part of the business.
My older brother did it for 4 years, and then I came after 2 years and did it. Younger brother graduated, and I mean, geez, this is 30 years for him, so that's 30-something for me, 37 or something like that.
Do you think she kept it going because deep down she knew that's what your dad would
Oh yeah,
wanted?
oh yeah. This was always sort of a shoestring operation. We didn't have any kind of trust fund. So everything here, including this building and everything, was paid for by selling wine.
The source of the winery's success, the wine, the grapes, even now, Mark says they're building off of Frank's beginnings.
We've gone back. Some of the new plantings we're doing are going to be like the old style. We're going to go back and do own rooted, as opposed to just automatically doing grafting. Of course, you always sort of go through these ups and downs as to where you are at the time. And we're at a good spot now. It might just be because my kids are getting involved, so I'm teaching them a lot about the history and and they have new ideas too. And we have a new winemaker who's really interested in that, so it's brought a lot of that back. And he's really interested in what did we used to do.
I mean, it's the biggest cliche in the biz, right? The great wines start in the vineyard. I look out the vineyard and I go, man, he planted this stuff 50 years ago when there was nothing else. That to me is, the building's great, but the vineyards are where it's at.
Growing up in Sonoma County, California, Mike Brunson feels at home here. He started making wine right out of high school.
Started when I was 18 and haven't missed a harvest since, yeah.
But for this formerly trained archaeologist, winemaking wasn't always his #1 job choice.
Archaeology doesn't really pay. And if you're looking to sort of progress and you've got a girlfriend that you want to be your wife, you got to make it look kind of attractive. And wine was more attractive than archaeology.
After several years in Sonoma, Mike says it was time for a change. When this job opened up, the light bulb went off. After talking with Mark, he knew it was a perfect fit.
100% Petit Verdot out of barrel, and we are probably going to bottle this up just before harvest.
He's been on the job for a year and says he's not only excited to flex his own winemaking muscles, but highlight what's been done over the last 50 years.
Really trying to hone in what his pop planted here and really sort of shine a light on those and say, he was probably right. It's, climate's changing, all that sort of stuff, but we can change our farming plans too to adjust to that and try and make something that not only showcases our skills, but showcases his pop's sort of vision as well.
I think he would be surprised that it's 50 years old. I think he'd be really thrilled that it's become what it's become.
A household name, a landmark in the Applegate Valley, vineyards rich with history, and Frank's hard work.
I still can't take out those 4 rows, the original 4 rows that I helped plant when I was 8 years old. I grafted them. I grafted them from Cabernet to Cabernet, but I still can't take those vines out. They're the last of the original 72 vines. They'll probably always be here.
What will also remain in Southern Oregon is Frank's legacy. You're hard-pressed to talk to many of the first winery owners in this region and not have them mention Valley View or Frank as part of their journey, both intertwined in so many other firsts.
He was an evangelizer for Southern Oregon. Once we started making the wines, he would talk to anybody who came down the driveway. And there would be a lot of people who would simply drive down our driveway and ask, "What are you doing?"
For Mark, it's balancing what has worked and the history here with a new direction and a new future in leadership. He says it wasn't until he was nearly 30 years old that he himself transitioned from the mindset of just keeping the business going to where he is now.
We were told, go out, go to New York, go to San Francisco, do what your dreams are. And it was a little bit hard to realize, well, really the place that I started growing grapes at 8 years old happens to be where I'm going to spend the rest of my career working. Well, yeah, it is.